Just
Hello, Sonia. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine too, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interview
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking.
you. So, friends, we have Sonia Richards here. She's a scientist, multidisciplinary therapist, author, singer. She has worked with Complementary Therapies, Hypnotherapy and Change Work profession since 2000. Sonia was part of the team who first introduced Mongan Method HypnoBirthing in the UK and was an external lecturer in hypnobirthing for the University of Greenwich for almost 10 years. She was also a member of the UK HypnoBirthing Advisory Board as board secretary. Sonia holds a Bachelor of Science honors, first class plus Master of Science with distinction and award-winning scientist in the field of Biomedical Sciences. So we will, in a while, understand why a scientist has come here, what she's doing. So we'll find out more about her. In 2013, she was appointed as a trainer and then the first international chair of the Association for IEMT Practitioners. So friends, IEMT stands for Integral Eye Movement Therapy or Techniques, developed by Andrew T. Austin, the developer of IEMT. Sonia recently wrote the first and to date only published book on IEMT. She is also a trainer in metaphors of movement. Sonia has spoken at several international conferences covering various modalities, and in 2021, she was invited to speak about metaphors of movement at the Society of Mental Space Psychology International Online Conference, Applications in Mental Space. Now, for something completely different to know about Sonia, she is also been a singer since she was a teenager and was a member of two bands from Liverpool in the early 1980s, namely Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Dead or Alive. So that is Sonia for us, trainer, author, coach, scientist, singer. Did you spare anything, honestly?
It sounds like unbelievable when you put it all out, really. It just happened.
So it just happens. I like that statement. So yeah, here's my first question. How the hell a scientist landed into the change work? What happened, the transition?
Well, it's really interesting. The very first modality, if you like, I explored was to practice was aromatherapy. But when I was researching my project for my BSc, I was doing it on pain management for breast pain. Not necessarily cancer, but I was working for the breast cancer unit in the UK at the time. And so I was looking at alternative methods as well as conventional methods for treating pain. So going down all the pharmacology routes. And I sort of happened upon some papers on aromatherapy and hypnotherapy. I thought, this is really interesting. And there was a professor in the UK using hypnotherapy, hypnosis for pain, for breast pain management. So I just contacted him and said, this is really interesting, could you tell me more about it? And so we had this two-way sort of conversation back in the day, very slow. It was more letters really and phone calls. It wasn't really much email back then. And so that piqued my interest. And also so did aromatherapy, which made sense to me because as a scientist, aromatherapy is basically chemistry. And it's similar, it's very similar to pharmacology in effect. And actually the actions of essential oils are pharmacological in the body. So that piqued my interest. And I thought, actually, because I love aromas, I've got a very, very strong olfactory sense, always have had as a child. And so I thought, I'd like to know more about this. So I decided to train in aromatherapy. And then my husband at the time, he was working, he was an operating theatre and surgery, a technician, but again, he got interested in hypnosis for pain relief. So he went off and did hypnotherapy. I went off and did aromatherapy. And then we sort of came together. and then formulated a program for childbirth because there wasn't anything really in the UK. And then we happened upon hypnobirthing in the US, Marie Mongan. So she asked, she said to Steve, well, there's no one else doing it in the UK. Why don't you bring it to the UK? So it kind of started from there. And then, of course, as ever, you know what it's like. You start with one thing, and then it spreads and it spreads and it spreads. And I was very much, yes, the science side of it, the pharmacology side of it with aromatherapy, until I watched hypnobirthing and I watched couples come along and really change the whole way of thinking about childbirth and the fears that they had around birthing. And my aha moment really was, oh, we've got to put the mind first before the body, or at least at the same time. You can't just, I was in the medical field. It's very much about treating symptoms and cancer, etc., and lots of other diseases, the effects. But what comes before that? And so I learned about cause and effect, and I thought, actually, we've got to start looking at mind as well as body, and that's how I sort of made that transition, really.
Amazing. And moving to IEMT, one, answer it honestly. Did your scientific mind, involve that? Does this really work just by moving eyes?
Exactly.
Did you have that
I was
logic?
very skeptical. Indeed. I mean,
sorry,
obviously,
Andy, I have to ask it by chance if you see it.
No, honestly, I'd already been trained in hypnotherapy by then. I hadn't trained in NLP, and I'd gone along to an NLP meeting in which Andy was, talking about, and IEMT was very, very new back then. And I actually had trained on my hypnotherapy training in EMDR, and it hadn't worked for me. And so, of course, I was incredibly skeptical that, another eye movement modality. Let's go along and listen to this and see if this is going to work. And surprisingly, it did. I just worked on something from my childhood that was still bothersome. And within, 30, 40 seconds, my whole perception of that memory and the feelings that I had with it had changed. And so, another light bulb moment. Okay, there must be something going on here.
but still, the scientific head was a little skeptical. Okay. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
because even having trained in hypnotherapy, and obviously I knew about mind-body connection, but I thought, really, because the EMDR didn't work for me, I thought, this is just, I don't know. I'm not really convinced. But I'm always open. So I went with the process completely open, and thankfully, I did get some sort of change. So I thought, actually, there's got to be more to it than me just being really skeptical. There's something to this. Is it jiggery pokery? Is it just, some sort of, they're putting some sort of spell on us and we don't know it? Or is there some neurology behind this? And so I started looking into the possible neurology behind it.
Okay, wonderful. And Sonia, since you're trained in both EMDR and IEMT, recently also I was talking to a therapist from Africa. She was telling, like, Nizam, after EMDR sessions, my clients are too tired. It is deep work and all that. And I have also heard, like, EMDR didn't work for me, but I seldom hear that IEMT hasn't worked on someone else.
Absolutely.
So, like, could you please clarify that EMDR versus IEMT? Like, why do people get tired in EMDR, but IEMT, like, I haven't heard from even a single person that they got tired or triggered. So, please.
Okay. I've been doing it a long time. And so, of course, I have come across people that do get very tired and do have physiological responses to IEMT. So it does happen with IEMT as well. also, of course, it happens because of what patterns of chronicity people might be running as well. What some people, although they say they want change, do they really want change? Some people can actually be resisting change. And so therefore, their brains are working harder to actually resist than just go with the flow. And that, when you think about this eye movement process and accessing memories, etc., the brain is using a lot of glucose very quickly. Okay. So it's not surprising then that the body can get fatigued quickly. And, you know, I do have people after IEMT that are tired, and I just say, just go home and just rest and take some water and just chill for the rest of the day. EMDR is a slightly, as you say, longer process sometimes. It's more diving into trauma a lot, whereas we, as you know, because you've trained, we stay outside of the trauma and the story. We don't have to go into story. And again, if someone is storytelling and they're recalling a lot of information, that's tiring for the brain. Yes. That's a lot of glucose, as I say, that the brain's using.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And is IEMT only for psychologists or any psychiatrists or therapists, or can anyone learn this, Sonia?
Anyone can learn it. However, there are caveats, of course. So if a person hasn't got a background in talking therapies, hasn't done any client work per se, doesn't understand the basics behind things like depression, anxiety, and traumas, I always say to people who want to train, because perhaps they've experienced IEMT for themselves, and so now they want to become practitioners and spread the word or whatever. I say, look, you need to do some background reading and study as well, because even though people say, oh, well, I don't want to work with trauma, we don't know who's going to come through that door. Yes. We don't know what childhood events they may have had. And so therefore, we need to have some understanding, and also the understanding to know that knowing when a person is out of their depth and when to refer on to either a completely different modality. So somebody may need counselling first rather than change work. So it's knowing when to notice the signs, notice signs of agitation, notice signs of abreaction, etc. So, okay, if a person hasn't got that background in psychology or counselling, etc., it is that knowing, you know, when to refer on a person. But yes, you know, it is open and available to all people. When I train people, however, that have no background, it's a much longer process for them. So they have up to a year to do lots of case studies for me. There's coursework. It's not just you do one case study, a 10-minute video, and you get a certificate. With people without that background, it's a much longer process, because I do make sure that they're doing lots of case studies. There's lots of coursework. There's lots of Q&A. We do lots of one-to-one. You know, I do mentoring for them one-to-one, so that I'm not going to give a certificate if I don't feel that person has grasped the concept and has done some background work for themselves to improve their knowledge. So that's how I train. And obviously, if somebody has got a background in counselling or hypnotherapy or NLP or whatever it is, it tends to be a shorter process, but again, not always. So I take it person by person and what they bring to me with their coursework, their case studies. And if I feel, actually, you haven't quite grasped this yet, I want you to go away and do another case study for me. And this is what I want you to read up on. With my trainings, of course, they get videos of everything now, because everything's on Zoom these days. Yes. So they get recordings of everything. They get tons and tons of resources online that I provide for people, pre-course, post-course. I also do post-course practice sessions with people. I do my tea parties. So there's lots and lots of input. So they don't just do a course and feel, oh, what do we do now?
So they are well equipped with all the resources to practice.
Absolutely, yeah. And yes, and I've trained lots of coaches who may not necessarily want to do the therapeutic side of things. But as you know, there are lots of models within IEMT that are very useful for coaching. 5 primary patterns of chronicity, for example, are key to understanding people's behavior and why they're getting themselves, that if they've come to a coach because they feel they're stuck and they're not going anywhere, or their business is stuck, or whatever it is, then those patterns, knowing those patterns helps people have real aha moments of, oh my God, I didn't hear myself saying that. I didn't realize I was doing this. And then coaching them how to start to make changes. So it is as much about training people and teaching. I mean, my therapy sessions are as much teaching as they are therapy, because I want people to go out with these skills to use them for themselves through life, so they don't feel that, oh, I have to see a therapist every time I start feeling this way. Then they can use the techniques for themselves.
Yes, amazing. And thank you. You brought this already. I was about to ask, like, can coaches use this in their work? And you already answered. And Sonia, one more question is, like, you have also authored a book. So
Yeah.
could you please tell about that book? And if possible, can we have a glance of the book?
Look at the book. Of course you can. There we go. Hope you can see that.
That's
so. That's the book.
Yes.
So integral eye movement techniques. I've called it the definitive guide. It's really the guide to what I call the level 1, or other people call the practitioner level of IEMT. So it's taken it right from the beginning, right through all of the techniques that we learn on the level 1 training. But also I've done a little bit of background stuff. So a bit of the history. How did IEMT come to be this way? Predicated on one of the questions in the model that we use. How did this person learn to be this way? How did this person learn to feel this way? So how did IEMT get to be this way? So I've done a little bit of history of how it got going, really, and the influences that Andy had from other modalities, etc., to sort of formulate the program. A little bit about the brain, not in too much depth, but again, obviously, I had to go there. Yes. Being an ex-biomedical scientist, having worked with, in neuropathology, etc., having actually held people's brains in my hands is an amazing. It's something that it never left me. To me, it was a reverence to, and a privilege and an honor to be working, in this field, and learning more, obviously, about the diagnosis on how that person, unfortunately, died of whatever neurological condition they had. But also, we were researching to help people for the future as well. And so that to me, was an honor and a privilege. And I thought, well, I wanted to put a little bit of neurology in, a bit of understanding. Perhaps we don't really know how IEMT works. I don't really think people really know, even though EMDR has been around a long time. I don't really think there's absolute cut and dried. We know how eye movements really change and facilitate memory. That work has still got to be done. But there are ideas, and luckily, because EMDR, there has been quite a lot of work and there is quite a lot of papers, so we can extrapolate a lot from the work that's been done there. So I want to put a little bit of that in. Also a little bit about eyes and eye movement, because it's eye movement after all. So the functionality of eyes and the importance. And then I start from what I call the foundation. So for me, the 5 patterns of chronicity are the foundation to IEMT. And as I say, if clients go away remembering nothing else, they will know about their patterns. And whether we do or don't do eye movements around those patterns, we don't always have to do that. And then I've sort of built it from there. So then gone into sort of the test exercise of the basic pattern of kinesthetic eye movement work, we tend to work with emotions first and IEMT and then come into identity. Not always, and it depends on how experienced a person is and what they're picking up on. But generally, emotions can sabotage a session if they're not dealt with. So if we can work with them first. So I've gone from that, gone into the basic, and then what I call the integral pattern, which some people call the complex pattern. And I find the word complex makes it seem like it's complex, but which it isn't. It's basically the same. Well, it's exactly the same questions. We're just looking for different things in the eye movements, and it is that little integral eye movement that's the key to what, you know, something that the brain is processing. At that point. In other modalities, there's a modality called brain spotting, you may have heard of. So they call it the brain spot. It's that little integral eye movement. And whereas with brain spotting, they find that integral movement and they'll hold it and have the person just hold at that point. With IEMT, we're obviously doing bilateral eye movements at that point to help to get that processing consolidation sped up. And I've found, you know, with brain spotting, when I've done a little bit of that in the past, you can be holding that for about 20 minutes, whereas with IEMT, it's much more rapid to stop the brain getting that processing in place and consolidation, etc. is what it needs at that point.
Amazing. And is there any application part, or this book gives theoretical?
No, it's absolutely how-to. It's a how-to book as well.
Okay, how to.
So it's I've written it obviously primarily for practitioners as a consolidation of their training. So when they've done the course and they've gone away and they're like, oh, what do we do now? There's a step-by-step, you know, we start off with patterns of chronicity, kinesthetic work, go into identity work, look at 3 pillars for the anxiety and the cycling around emotions model, look at the PTSD model and episodic memory, physiological state accessing cues. I'm really hot on physiology. For me, when I'm training people, I say IEMT is not just about moving people's eyes around. It's about that person as a whole. And we really want to be primed on their body language. That's so important. So bringing that work in as well. I've even done a little chapter on how to work through Zoom, you know, for people that want to work remotely, and a chapter on dealing with abreactions as well, because abreactions can occur, and there's the 3-stage abreaction, but there's also the conventional abreaction. So what to do in that case as well. So it's quite a broad book, but yes, there's step-by-step on how to do each of the actual parts of the modality.
So this book, what I understand from after you are saying that, it's not only for the people who are new to IEMT. This is a good handbook for already trained people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, I was interviewing somebody yesterday, and he said, for me, it's the Bible. He says, it's like the Bible. So that literally is what he said. And he said, and he's, you know, trained and an advanced practitioner. He said it's just great to come back and flick, and you know, a lot of people tell, because I've written it in quite a literary way. I also do creative writing and some fiction writing as well. So I've written it with a narrative. I've written it not just A, B, C, and you do this. I've hopefully put some personality into it as well, and put some of my stuff in there, and you know, this is for me, and etc. So a couple of little stories from my past.
Can I say the scientist also added some creative aspects also, not just logical?
Definitely. Otherwise, it would have been too dry,
sidetracked from the, you know, scientists are just technical, A, B, C, no, not that.
No, and you know, I am a creative person. I've been a singer and a songwriter for many years. So I wanted to, as I say, put a narrative in there, so it would keep people's interest and people would want to carry on reading through the book.
So I need to say scientist and has added music also to the book.
Sort of. I mean, I do on my courses. I've always got music on the courses. I have playlists. So, you know, weekend one will be all the sort of kinesthetic, emotional songs. Weekend two will be identity-based songs, the songs of I, me, myself, you, and all of these sort of words. And then, but also, I actually, when I'm training people, I'm teaching them the speed of doing eye movements. I have certain songs for them to practice along to. So they use the music to get the right tempo of eye movements as well.
Wow.
So,
And Sonia, this, as you said, IEMT is not just limited to eye movements. So can you please also talk about this somatic work that is done, like in the IEMT? What kind of other work? Like, you know, there's some somatic work involved. So
absolutely, there is. We call it PSACs, physiological state accessing cues, because some people, well, everybody at some point in their life, we will hold our bodies in such a way that it will have a feedback to the brain. So often we're thinking about the brain feeding back to the body, but we rarely talk about the body feeding back to the brain. Well, we know that the vagus nerve, 80% of the nerves that run off, the peripheral nerve that run off from the afferent fibers, 80% are afferent, so they're running to the brain. So we're getting massive feedback via the vagus nerve to the brain. Okay. So part of the PSACs work is very much about sending some useful information from the body to the brain, because what happens is people will get into a thought and a state or a mood. They will hold that in their body, and over time the body will then just adopt certain postures, and it then is feeding back that information that I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm jealous, I'm anxious, or whatever it is. And so it's this feedback loop which is keeping the state in place. So it's harder for them to break that if they're adopting certain physiological stances, because it's become habit. So what we do is we actually elicit what it is they're doing with their body, and then teach them how to break that very, very simply. And it only has to be tiny little movements. It doesn't have to be jumping up and down to break the state, or the code that would work as well. We know movement will break state. There's been some great work on that by Dr. Amy Cuddy, and she's got TED Talks and things about, you know, physiology and the effect on mood, and, you know, how if we're going into an interview, we need to do a power pose to hold the power pose. So that's feeding to the brain, you know, the sort of confidence. But with the PSACs work, it really only has to be a tiny little movement. And then what we do is we check out little movements and say, well, is that now the same, or is it different? Oh, well, it's different. Okay, is it better or worse? That feels a bit better. Okay. And then we just get them to put it back to how it was. And then we'll try something else and try something else. So then they have their own little repertoire, and they're going to take that everywhere. They take those skills everywhere with them. So they start noticing the, you know, I don't know, the jaw's getting tight, or the shoulders are going up, or whatever it is in a certain situation. They can then correct it with some breathing as well, because the breath work is so important, with some breath work to release that tension and the state that they're getting in. Because of course, if we're in a certain mood or state, our brain processes are the thoughts that we're having are often not useful at that point in time as well. So it's limiting us in our ability to do what it is that we need to do. So it's going to allow the mind to be freer and the body to be freer to actually do stuff that we need to do. Whether that's just going out the supermarket to do some shopping, you know, it doesn't have to be a huge, wonderful task that I'm about to change my life. Some people just need it so they can cope with normal everyday stuff. You know, that's really important as well. So yeah, there's that side of it, which I love. I love movement work anyway. I think it's really important. And then there's the identity work. So looking at...
Do you know mind reading, Sonia? Please tell me.
I've got the book, I've not read it yet.
Because I wanted to ask about, can coaches use IEMT? You already answered. Then, this identity work part question I had in my mind and you have picked up. So you are reducing my job.
I'm already using it.
Yeah.
There we go. So with the identity work, I have to say the identity is my favorite subject out of everything that I work with, and I'm actually going to be running just a little workshop just on identity soon, for self-discovery, not necessarily for doing stuff with clients, but just for who we are and how we're being. I always say who we are affects the how we're being. So yes, we can start, we can look at the kinesthetics of things, and that's great and that's important, but almost that's like dealing with the effect rather than the cause. Who we're being is often at the core of then how we're being and how we're feeling. So if we can start to elicit an understanding about ourselves, who we are, we may not like ourselves, and why is that? And then do some work on starting to change that. Also, there's aspects of ourselves that are not connected to the body, that are at an age that is not conducive to getting on with stuff in life. If part of my identity is stuck at a young age and I'm operating and reacting at that young age, that's not useful in the here and now for many people. So we look at bringing them, updating them, or down dating them, because some people, depending on what's gone on in their lives, for example, we have a lot of young carers in the UK that have had to, at a very young age, start caring for their parents who are terminally ill or have all sorts of issues going on. So they are very much old-headed for their age. Sometimes when I'm asking people, they'll say, oh, I feel like I'm 70. I've even had 1,000 before. So sometimes we need to bring people, we need to down date them and bring them into the here and now. So that work, I talk very much about, it's getting the aspects of ourselves as aligned as we possibly can, somewhere within the body preferably, so that when we're out in the world and we're going about our business and we're dealing with our families and our jobs or whatever it is, we're doing it very much as a cohesive being, rather than a person that's scattered to the four winds, as David Groves said. Sometimes identity is like when a bomb goes off internally and parts of us scatter all over the place. So it's about gathering in those parts, bringing it back, updating or down dating that person, so that most of the time they're in the here and now. They're not future pacing or going back in time. Obviously, we see that with trauma a lot, people wanting to go back in time to be who they were. It's about educating people, well, that isn't possible actually. I do talk though about chronesthesia on the course, and I go into the workings of how that works with Tulving's work, with episodic memory, and get people to understand that as human beings we all have the capacity to have this chronesthesia experience, but for some parts of our existence or some parts of our lives, constantly being in the past or constantly wanting to be in the future is not conducive to what we or who we are in the here and now, and it's unsettling, or it can be unsettling. So enabling people to come back to the here and now, and again notice when they're veering off in directions, and then being able to bring themselves back when they need to is important. We all like to reminisce. We all like to go back to a lovely memory we've had. We all like to think, oh, well, yes, I'd like to plan a holiday for next year. So that sort of stuff is fine when it's I hate the words positive and negative, but when it's a more positive outlook. But of course, some people, they're not doing that. They're going back to past awful memories and they're fearing the future. So it's about getting that balance for people. We're not always going to be, perfect and all singing and dancing all of the time. That's human nature. That's life. We're a mixture of all shades and hues, aren't we? However, for some people, it can be really detrimental to keep either future pacing or going to the past. So it's just giving them resources to understand that. And as I say, very much what I do is educational, getting them to understand, getting them to notice. So noticing somatically what is going on for them, and then being able to facilitate their own change should they need to as well.
So does your book have the section for identity related information as well?
Absolutely. Three chapters on identity. I love identity. And so I've gone into a little bit of the sort of philosophy of identity, a little bit of stuff of what I do with clients as well, and looking at statements and breaking them down. So there's the first chapter is more sort of philosophy and background to identity. Second chapter is the IEMT model that we've taken from David Grove's work and looking at that. And then the third chapter is literally taking some statements, breaking it down, see how we can work with that. Also bringing in some of the third party, other names, anthropomorphisms that people actually take on certain conditions and give them an identity of their own. So they're having a relationship with something, and how that can be unuseful for people, problematic for people. So again, it's how we listen. So as IEMT practitioners, we want to be listening and really hearing what's happening and seeing as well. So it's bringing all of that work together, not just, oh yeah, you're feeling angry on a scale of 1 to 10. How strong is that? Doing that and thinking that that's all we need to do. There's much more to it. There's so many more layers.
True.
And also, of course, if someone says they're angry, then immediately in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I wonder if they're cycling round a pattern. So we think of that 3 pillars model. Okay, if they mention things like anger or anxiety or guilt or shame, are they cycling around? Are they putting these emotions, chaining them together? And is that causing them a problem as well? So we want to be listening out for all of these things right from the get-go, and those patterns of chronicity. Absolutely, because that's going to come out in the language, it's going to come out in the questionnaire. We want to be picking all of that up as well, even before we see them. So that's why I teach people is to use this model, not just in a sort of flat 2D way. It was very much a 3D exploration with people.
Amazing. And is this book available on Kindle as well, Sonia?
It's coming very soon. I'm getting my hopefully the Kindle version is coming over to me this week for me to just do my final checks on. Okay. So in a week, 2 weeks maximum, it should be up on Kindle. So
is it available in India? There's not the Kindle version, the hard copy.
I don't think it is. Amazon are kind of strange. They only put it in certain places around the world, unless it's a bestseller. Unless if it sells thousands, then they start distributing it everywhere. It's in certain hubs. So, for example, people in Europe, not all European countries can get it, but it's in Germany, it's in France, it's in Spain, it's in Italy. So they can actually order it. So the people in the Netherlands, and there's a lot of practitioners, they order theirs from Germany. India, I don't know what the nearest hub for India would be, actually. I don't know. So that's something that...
So we need to
look it up and let me know, actually, that because obviously I've got family in India and lots of friends and stuff that I'd like to get the book as well. So it'd be interesting. But of course, once it's on Kindle, it's going to be available for everyone.
There is alternative is Kindle version.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for giving me this opportunity, and I just loved it. And talking to a scientist and then a singer and then author, and that element was like it was a mini session on IEMT. So I want this book to hit the international bestseller because the subject is so beautiful that many people, especially people who are involved with any sort of change work, if they combine IEMT, it does wonders. It's such a beautiful.
Absolutely. And that's what I say, you know, we don't have to use it just in isolation.
Yes.
We can weave it in with stuff. Obviously, I weave it in with metaphors of movement, social panoramas, some, you know, physical work, some breath work, my hypnobirthing work, some IMT patterns of chronicity comes in, you know, so it can be weaved into lots of different things. And it enhances, I think, understanding of people and then change.
So at least let's wish that, you know, this Kindle version goes worldwide. And I am sorry, I always keep breaking this promise in many of the interviews because questions, I say this is my last question and keep on coming. So any plans for translation of this book in different languages?
Not specifically. I've had people from Israel interested, and again, the Netherlands. It's very difficult, you know, because it's the subject matter. It's finding somebody that understands the subject matter, that's got good enough skills in English, that will be able to translate it into whatever language we want to translating into. So it's a matter of finding somebody suitable to be able to do that, and it's kind of a very long process. I mean, it took me quite a few years on and off to write the book, you know, so the actual process is quite a long one. But I am hoping to do follow up on some of the more adaptations of IMT. I've got trainers in Israel and the Netherlands and various places that are doing slightly different takes on it, that I thought it'd be nice to add that into a follow-up of this sort of the level 2 stuff, if you like. So fingers crossed, that'll come.
Okay, thank you once again. So friends, what I'm going to do is below the YouTube description, I'm going to provide website and other details where you can directly contact Sonia in case if you need personal sessions or if you're interested in online training in IEMT. So Sonia is here, so I'll be providing all the required details so you can directly contact. Thank you once again, Sonia.
Thank you so much.
It was nice talking to you. Bye.
Bye-bye.